Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
Question is, will they kill untold millions as they did in the last century? It is not the elite cockroaches that determine that. It is you.
Foreign Relations is a sister organization of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, both of which were formed out of the old Cecil Rhodes Roundtable groups. These are the royalty, the banking elite of Europe, of the world, and then they came over here. They were the ones who tried to instigate the League of Nations at World War I, but we didn't want to give up our sovereignty, so then they formed the Council on Foreign Relations, specifically with the goal of educating the American people to why we needed to be part of a United Nations. These are the globalists. These are the people that George Bush Sr. referred to as the New World Order.
Okay. Tell me about Sam Rayburn.
Well, Sam Rayburn was the Speaker of the House, and he was the mentor of Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, okay.
And the famous story is that when Kennedy got the nomination at the Democratic National Committee convention, that Johnson was so mad he stomped off the stage, and Sam Rayburn went after him and said, "Come on, Lyndon, get back, play the game, go along, you'll get your chance." Okay. So Lyndon came back in, and of course Kennedy then, to try to mend fences in the Democratic Party, offered the vice presidency to Johnson, never thinking for a minute that he'd take this powerless job when he was the most powerful senator on the Hill. And to the surprise of both Kennedy and Johnson's people, Johnson accepted the vice president's nomination. And later, when he was asked, "Why'd you do that?" he said, "Well, it put me one step closer to the presidency."
Isn't that prophetic?
And it also showed his ambition. H.L. Hunt had put out and ran an ad in the Dallas newspapers charging Kennedy with treason. And so you can see that among the wealthy elite of this country, they not only hated him, they viewed him as a traitor and a criminal. And of course, there were violent factions ready to take action once it was understood that nothing would be done to them. Years ago, one of the earliest researchers, Penn Jones, told me that he had learned from servants and people attending the meeting that there had been a meeting at a oil man's house the night before the assassination, and present there was Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, J. Edgar Hoover, and he styled it as a last-minute commanders meeting. Later years, I met Madeline Brown, who was a mistress, a girlfriend to Lyndon Johnson, and she told me she had been at that meeting and that Johnson had arrived a little late, and he and Hoover and Nixon and the oil men had all gone into another room. And when they came out of that room, that Johnson whispered to her and said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing, those goddamn Kennedys will never bother me again after tomorrow." And that came from Madeline Brown, and I can assure you that she was Lyndon Johnson's girlfriend.
Well, it's a tragedy, really, for me, on a deeply personal level. What this location represents to me is not only, obviously on a national level and an international level, but on a deeply personal level, it's caused an incredible amount of heartache and sadness in my family.
Do you feel like your father, towards the end, felt any regrets?
No. I think he died without having, well, as a matter of fact, he told me the only regrets that he had and he was very sick when he told me this, very close to death. And I was, you know, he paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts, and at that moment, I was thinking, did he have regrets about his wife being murdered, about his children being, you know, his family being destroyed? And no, it wasn't those things. It was that the Bay of Pigs had not been successful. So that's the kind of guy my dad was.
And keep in mind, those people that were involved with the Bay of Pigs, and when it failed, who did they blame? Kennedy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They blamed Kennedy.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, when you really go look at the dig down into the Bay of Pigs, you find out that Kennedy wasn't even aware that that was going to happen until after he got elected.
Right. That was
planned by Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Who was the White House political action officer of Eisenhower.
That's right.
Right?
That's
so
right.
It was a fait accompli.
Yes.
It was already going to happen, and yet when it failed, Kennedy took the responsibility for it.
Yeah, not Nixon. With Nixon, his history with my dad goes back to the Bay of Pigs days.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was made aware that E. Howard Hunt was working in a team for him, I mean, I don't know when he was made aware of that, but I know that Charles Colson brought him in, you know, to become what was eventually called the Plumbers Unit.
So when it was time to form the Plumbers and start what came to be known as Watergate, he was glad to get E. Howard Hunt on his team. Right?
Yeah, well, he knew E. Howard Hunt could take care of things. That's why I also, on the other side of that same coin, he was very worried about my dad, because that Hunt knows too much.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a Watergate Nixon transcript tape.
Yeah. And of course, all through those Watergate tapes in the White House, he kept referring to that whole Bay of Pigs thing. You know, and of course, by then, now it's 1974.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
H.R. Haldeman said he finally came to understand that when Nixon was concerned about that whole Bay of Pigs thing, that was a code word for the Kennedy assassination.
Yes, that's right.
When you get these people, say, look, the problem is that this is the whole Bay of Pigs thing, and the president just feels that, without going into details, someone don't lie to him, but he can't say it, or someone falls on foot, he would say, this is sort of comedy of errors, it's bizarre, and without getting into it, the president can believe that this is going to open the whole Bay of Pigs thing up again. And because these people are planning for peace, and that they should call the FBI in and push the country, don't go any further into this case, period. That's what our next starts. This is Hunt, that'll uncover a lot of real net scandals on a lot of things, and then we just feel that this would be very detrimental to have this thing going further. This involves the Cubans and a lot of hanky-panky that we have nothing to do with ourselves. What the hell did Mitchell know about this thing very much? I think so. I don't think he knew the details, but I think he didn't know how.
Well, I'll even go this far. I think the people who planned and executed the Kennedy assassination looked upon themselves as patriots. They felt like they were saving this country from international communism.
Yeah.
What they didn't understand was that the same international banking oligarchy that was controlling the United States were the same folks that created communism.
Yes. Yeah.
People have always said to me, well, hey, if there's a conspiracy, wouldn't someone have talked? Hey, they've all talked. You got James Files who said, yeah, I did it. You got the documents coming out about the French Corsicans that was secreted out of Dallas the day of the assassination. You've got the Warren Commission. I've got a document there where they said, well, we looked into Oswald's background, but this is going to take some serious omission and redaction. In other words, editing. In other words, we're not going to tell everybody the truth about what his background was, and they've all talked. Everybody's talked.
It's very cathartic, you know, to get all this out. It's very empowering to know that that my father put me in a position to give this information to the public, something that he could not do in his life. And when he said to me, when he gave me this information and said that he wanted me to release this after he died. You know, I carried this kind of monster on my back, you know, for the last couple of years, and it feels very empowering and very good to get this out.